Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live launch celebrating the release of my newest biblical novel called Hannah. I'm really excited to have some author friends here with me today. And I thought that I would just quickly welcome them, and then each of them can also kind of share either what they're working on or one of their newest projects that they have out. So we have Jennifer Moore, Geigle Johnson, Michelle Wilson, and Julie Daines. And so why don't you start, Jennifer Moore, and just say hi and introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi. Like Heather said, I'm Jennifer Moore, and I write historical fiction. And right now I am working on a book of the Blue Orchid Society series. And I'm excited about Heather's book. I love the story of Hannah.
Thank you. And Jen Geigle Johnson.
Hey, so that's me, and I also write historical fiction, romance. I am working on my latest Regency Royal. It's coming out in August. Some last minute edits and things with the publisher, and have written a fun nonfiction with Heather that kind of makes me love this topic in this direction in books, and I love Hannah because of that. And so I'm here to celebrate women in the scriptures.
Thanks, Jen. And Michelle Wilson.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm so excited to be here. I write inspirational nonfiction for women. So I do some fiction on the side, but I'm not published there yet. But I love writing about the scriptures and the gospel and, putting some humor into it, because you got to laugh, right?
Yeah. For sure. And Julie Daines.
Hi, I also write historical fiction and romance like Jennifer and Jen, and I have a new book coming out in December that's set in Sherwood Forest. It's a Regency romance. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm happy to be here today with Heather. She is one of my idols in the world of writing, and I just love her biblical stories. She really brings the people from the scriptures to life, and it's so touching, and I love her stories.
Well, thank you, Julie. And thanks, everyone, for being here. I remember when I was first starting out and writing scripture fiction about different characters, I thought, was there readership for it? And I'd look on different bookstores and different websites, and I felt like there's probably a small core readership out there. But I found that I just really love researching and thinking about what were the lives really like. And the more I did, the more I realized that there was a lot to relate to. So I was just going to first just talk about Hannah for a minute, and then we're each going to talk about one of our favorite women in the scriptures. And the reason that I decided to write about Hannah, at first I thought, okay, who's a woman I could write about? And if you read some of my books, I've written about several. And Hannah is one of those women that goes through some very difficult trials. And if you're familiar with the story, she is considered barren. And in her culture, which is ancient Israel, they lived just outside of Shiloh, is she knew that her husband had to continue his posterity. And so she's considered barren. Then her husband has a legal right to put her away, which means divorce her, or he can take a second wife. And so I don't know how many years passed before they made that decision, or she made it, or her husband made it, or they made it together, where in order to continue her husband's posterity, he took a second wife named Peninnah. And Peninnah was not the most cheerful sister wife, I guess you could say. And she was not very humble. And there could have been just a lot of backstory between them. Maybe they're rivals at school, or in their little sewing groups they had, or their weaving girls' night out. We don't know. But Peninnah is very proud that she's able to have children. And it's definitely something that, especially in their culture, that it was revered. And so she felt like she had been blessed by the Lord to have these children for her son, or her husband, Elkanah. And it's interesting what makes it into the scriptures and what doesn't. What makes it into the scriptures is Peninnah was very harsh toward Hannah and kind of belittled her and bullied her and never let her forget that she was the wife, even though she's the younger wife and the second wife, she was the fertile wife. So Hannah goes through an identity crisis, and I think that, you know, she had kind of felt like, okay, I'm barren. This is my burden to bear. This is my trial in life. But when you're constantly having it thrown into your face and you see everyone else around you having children, she really just went into just, you know, a deep depression and just felt like, what is my value in life? What is my worth? And Elkanah is a sweetheart husband, and he tells her, and this reminds me of was it, what's that? Oh yeah, Mary Poppins. Okay, remember the parents in Mary Poppins, and the husband is always just grumpy about his bank job and how, you know, his naughtiest children are, and how all these different nannies come and go, and the wife says, "What, am I not enough? Can I not be enough for you to find happiness in life?" And that's what Elkanah did to Hannah. He said, "Am I not enough? Do you not love me enough? Am I not better than having 10 sons?" So I don't know what Hannah responded, but she basically got to the point where she was so despondent on one of their temple trips that the high priest Eli noticed her. And so kind of, and, you know, and we all know the story that he gives her blessing. She ends up having a baby and promises him to the Lord. So this is the part I had an issue with, is how does a parent, a mother or father, how do they say, okay, the Lord is blessing me with a child, and when he is weaned and of age, I will then drop him off at the temple and go back home, which is like a 2 or 3 day journey, and just let him be raised by these priests. Well, most of them are wicked, and they know that they're wicked. Eli is not wicked, but he's an old man, so he can't really chase around a kid and maybe be a father figure. And so I thought, well, this story is really depressing, so I don't want to write about Hannah. She just has to, you know, sure, she's happy now in heaven, but then I did more research, and I realized that her son was going to be the prophet, and her son was going to turn around the country of Israel and change hearts. And his mission was a lot bigger than just Hannah having a baby and enjoying the baby years with her son, and enjoying watching him grow up and become a man and farm his own fields and have a wife and have his own children. So Samuel's, I guess, his predestination was a bigger picture. And so I think the reason Hannah went through all these trials is she really went through a refiner's fire, so that when she was asked to give this sacrifice by the Lord, which I think she was asked whether it was a personal revelation or a spiritual prompting, that she was willing to do that. She was willing to say, okay. And then later on, she was blessed with more children. Not that softens her trials or what she went through, but the blessings just kept coming when she went through this trial of faith. And so it just really touched my heart, because I thought, how many times do each of us in our lives, we have a trial of faith that is so hard, but if we can really step back and look at the big picture and have a bigger perspective of our whole life, or even an eternal perspective, that we can still see the blessings through our trials and challenges. And I have a sister who, I won't let her live this down, but she's 2 years older than me, and she'll always be old. And I got married before her. I had children before her, and she had a little boy, and then she struggled with infertility for many years, and ended up doing in vitro and ended up having twins after that. But I remember just her struggle was more personal, not just, how come I can't have the blessings that someone else has, or how come, you know, this teenager just got pregnant, you know, in high school, and I can't have children. But it was more the question of does the Lord love me, and does he see me, and does he care about me? I'm not supposed to be emotional on these things, but I think it's something that every person asks themselves when they're going through something really hard. But we can really feel God's love when we turn to him and we let his will be done, even when it's not necessarily on our wish list that year or that month. Anyway, so sorry about getting emotional. I guess it took me back to many moons ago. And now she has 6 children, and she's funny about it. She says, "No one told me how hard kids would be." I said, "Well, you're the one that wanted them." Anyway, so let's go to Jennifer, and you can share with us one of the women in the scriptures that you've really related to.
Okay, that was lovely, Heather. Thank you. So the woman that I chose is Rebecca. She's just, if you're like going through and being like, now which one is Rebecca? She's the one that is married to Isaac, who's Abraham's son. And Isaac is the guy who almost got sacrificed, but he didn't get sacrificed. So I guess just because we're studying the Old Testament this year, and I read that story again, even though I kind of know it kind of felt a little different this year. And I think the thing is that I noticed about Rebecca is so many families in the Old Testament are just a disaster. They're so dysfunctional, and the sons are trying to kill their brothers, and everybody hates each other, and people are running away in the middle of the night. But when Abraham's servant, went to his hometown to find a wife for Abraham to bring back to Canaan, for Isaac, he went there and he's like, okay, I'm going to find a lady. And he prayed that the Lord would help him find the right girl. And she came right out, and she was filling her pitcher, and he's there with 10 camels, and I don't know, like some guys that rode on the camels, whoever was all with him. And he asked her if he could have a drink, and she's like, yes, of course. Oh, let me get your camels a drink too, and let me make sure everybody's okay. And it probably wasn't, I don't know how much camels drink, but a lot, right? I think anyway. So she just like was loving and happy, and he gave her some jewelry, and she ran right away. And it says to the house of her mother to show them. And when I was listening to a podcast by a scripture biblical scholar guy, and he said this probably means like her mother's, not like her mother's house, but like where her mom came from. So her grandparents. And so she went and she was telling her grandparents, and they were excited for her. And her brother Laban comes out and he welcomes the servant, and probably I think there were other guys with the servant, brings everybody in and all their camels and takes care of them. And he's like, well, I want her to come home and marry Abraham's son, Isaac. And they were like, well, let's ask her what she thinks. So she was beloved, and they trusted her, and they cared what she thought, and they didn't just want to send her off to marry a stranger. They wanted to make sure she's okay with it. And she took her nurse, I think it was her nurse or her maid, just probably like her best friend with her, and her name was Deborah, I think. I'm not a biblical scholar. I do not remember all these things. Also, everything I say is my opinion here, right? But, and later it talks about Deborah being buried. So she was kind of a part of the household too. And I just think Abraham and Isaac, I don't know how that all happened with the sacrificing, and if Isaac was traumatized, but for her to come and bring her just happiness and loveliness and be a good, happy wife, I wonder if that's kind of what, when her son Jacob goes back later looking for a wife, and Laban kind of changed over time, because now he's the guy that's tricking him into marrying the different wife, marrying Leah. I think that's what he was looking for when he went, and he's like, no, I want a woman that I love, like I saw my mom and dad with this great marriage. So anyway, those are all my opinions about that, but I feel like she was a happy, lovely person that everybody liked to be around. So there we go.
I like that. I like that idea of, her son wanting to marry someone that had the same heart as his mother. Yeah. I love that idea. Thank you. And Jen, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Okay. So I'm feeling so inspired by this discussion. I'm grateful to be a part of this. This will make my whole week probably. I have a story of Hagar. So this is similar, actually, truly, in many ways to your Hannah story, only Hagar is the handmaiden and Sarah is the wife who was barren. So it was determined that she was barren. And of course, we know later had her son. But when they pretty much gave up, Sarah received inspiration that she should offer her handmaiden to Abraham so that he could have seed, because Abraham was promised so much seed and there was none. And so Abraham takes Hagar to wife and they have a son, Ishmael. But Hagar and Sarah do not get along. And there was tension, and Hagar leaves as a pregnant woman, just walks out into the desert and leaves, and is met by an angel and reminded to return, and said, your son is going to be the father of a great nation. You are Abraham's seed. And so told her she had to go back. So she returned and I guess worked it out with Sarah. They don't say much in the Bible, as you said, but there comes a time when Sarah has Isaac, and the scriptures say that she noticed Ishmael mocking her son. And I think that was probably the last straw in Sarah's mind. So she goes to Abraham, says, Isaac is the heir. We need to get rid of this boy who's making fun of my child, and sends them away. And so Abraham says he's really sad. But the Lord tells him that, yeah, you can listen to Sarah, send him off. Isaac will be the heir of this nation, but Ishmael will also be the heir of a great nation. And I thought, often I feel like we skirt around the story of Hagar and don't do her justice because it's an uncomfortable story, right? So we feel like that's mean. How could the Lord or Abraham do this to a woman and her son? And we don't understand that side of it. But if you just look at the part that we do understand, it is a beautiful story of, yes, the Lord does see us and he does love us, even when it looks like everything is going against us. It's proof of this very thing. And I think it's beautiful because what happens is Hagar is literally sent into the desert with one thing of water, whatever they use to carry water in, and some bread or dates. Stories are conflicting as to what kind of food, and goes walking out into the desert alone with her son. And there comes a point that she gives up after much effort. I'm going to share a tiny bit. I'm trying to make this as quickly as possible. She gives up after much effort, and she sits looking away from her son and basically says, I can't bear to watch him die, and just sits there. And what happens is an angel comes, and the one thing that I love about this story is it's one of the very, very few times that an angel or the Lord has ever called someone by name. And he says her name, and it's like, I know you, I see you, and there is a huge work for you to do. And that's kind of what, and then the angel shows her a well, and they survive. And Hagar ends up being the founding mother of Mecca. And so her son Ishmael is the father of the 12 tribes. I don't want to misquote or misstate anything to do with Islam, but there's a huge family that is created and was expected. The Lord said this would happen, and they are all beloved of the Lord, and they live. And anyway, what I wanted to share, this is all biblical. So now what I want to share with you is, sorry, I'm talking too much, but in just in deference to what Elder Bednar and Elder Gong just said, and the whole pamphlet they created on Muslims and LDS and the coordinating between the faiths, I wanted to just share, in Islam, when people make the trip to Mecca, they honor Hagar on that journey, that pilgrimage, because according to Islam, Hagar did not just walk into the desert and give up, but she knew, she had a knowledge that it was the Lord's will that she's there. And she literally walked between two hills 7 times to try to find water before she finally decided there's no water. And so when the Islamic people make their trip and their pilgrimage to Mecca, they follow the path between the hills 7 times as a part of that journey to Mecca in honor of Hagar. And I just think this is enlightening for LDS people to understand and to acknowledge that she was chosen of the Lord. It was the Lord's will that Ishmael be born and that he leave, but look what happened because of it. But my favorite part of the story is simply that in her mind, it probably looked like all was lost. And in our minds, like Heather was saying, it does often look like all is lost. But just because we're going through a trial does not mean the Lord does not see us and that he's not right there helping us and letting us know he loves us. And he called her by name. And I'm just going to leave that right there as it is. I love Hagar. I love what her story teaches. I just wish so much we had more of it.
Thanks, Jen. I love that story too. I love how you added some of those additional insights, from the Islam religion. So, because I think that the more, because there are like almost all these stories, they have different takes, and we can find our own insights that way as well. So thank you. And Michelle, do you want to go next?
I would love to, but I first want to say there have been many times in my life where I could have taken one of my kids and dropped them off somewhere to have someone else raise them.
Yeah.
So I feel for Hannah, not making light of her sacrifice, but there have been times when I'm like jealous. I'm so excited to be here. I love, and I wish there were more stories of women in the scriptures. And I love the stories that we have. So I chose the woman at the well. I have always had a soft and special place in my heart for her. Interestingly enough, we don't know her name. And I kind of have a soft spot for the characters that play vital roles that don't have a name, like the disciples that Jesus, when he came in for his triumphal entry, he asked some disciples to go and get the donkey. We don't know their names, but they fulfilled prophecy. I love that. But I think that Jesus did know her name. It's just not in here. But I love this account for a lot of reasons. So this was after, so you can find her account in John chapter 4. One of the things that I love is this is the longest recorded conversation Jesus had with anyone in the scriptures. Like even his disciples, he didn't have a conversation this long that's recorded in here. And so in John chapter 3, Jesus had just met with Nicodemus at night. And now John chapter 4, they're walking from Jerusalem to Samaria, and it's like a 60-mile walk. So halfway through, they're tired, and he is there at Jacob's well, where, Rebecca met her husband, and, all these just amazing things happen at this well. And the disciples go into town. And they're buying meat. So Jesus is alone. And here comes this woman during the day. Now she comes during the day because she has a bad reputation. She's had 5 husbands. Those relationships have all ended either in divorce or a death of a husband. But she doesn't come early in the morning or late at night to be with the other women. She comes by herself because she is not a part of any group. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've had times in my life when I felt very alone, when I felt like I don't belong. And this, I'm assuming, this is probably somewhat of how she felt. She's carrying the pot of water that could be, 20 pounds filled with water, could be 40 pounds. It's a heavy pot of water, right? This empty pot that she's going to fill. And she comes there and she sees Jesus. She doesn't know who he is. She sees this Jewish man. Now, back in those times, there was a great animosity between the Samaritans and the Jews. They both thought that they had the truth, that the other one was a compromised people. And so there was some animosity. They didn't talk to each other. And it was also not typical and inappropriate for a man to talk to a woman alone. So you have all of these things stacked up against her. And I love the fact that she's walking to the well. She sees him and she still went to the well. She didn't say, I shouldn't be here. I'm not going to do this. He's going to be mean. She's like, I want water and I'm going. She knew what she wanted. But I love the conversation. So she's there. She goes to draw the well. And then in verse 7, Jesus just says, give me drink. And her response, I think she takes a moment to pause. And maybe she's thinking, why are you asking me this? And for me, this conversation is about a relationship, right? How often does Heavenly Father, the Lord, ask us to do something? And we take a beat. We're like, why are you asking me to do that? Maybe that looks hard. Maybe it doesn't make sense. She doesn't know. And then her response to him is, how is it that you're asking me to do this? How am I supposed to do this? Because back in those days, according to some Jewish texts, to even touch something a Samaritan woman had touched would make you unclean, and you would have to therefore go and become clean again in living water, which is water that has come from a moving and living source, not stagnant water. So it was a big deal. So she's like, you want me? You want to touch my water cup? And his response to her, in verse 10, he says, if thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, give me drink, thou would have asked him, and he would have given thee living water. Now, I love this because he doesn't say, well, yeah, you should take it from me because this is who I am.
Mhm.
But he acknowledges what she wants. So first of all, he knows what she's going to do, right? He says, I know if you knew who I was, you would totally take this water. To me, that tells me that the Lord knows who we are more than we do before. And he asks us to do things because he knows how we're going to respond. He knows that we're going to struggle with some things. He knows that some things we're just going to be amazing at, but he knows us. It's all about our relationship with him. And then she goes on and she says, well, are you greater than Jacob that made this well? And again, he doesn't come back and say, do you know who I am? But he goes on to tell her in verse 13, whosoever drinketh of this water shall never thirst again. So again, he's still not making it about him, but he goes back and he tells her, I know what you want. Think about what she wanted. She wanted peace. She wanted healing. She wanted understanding. She wanted redemption. And he's offering her those things. And that's what the Savior can offer to us. And I love that first he establishes that he knows her and that he understands what she needs. And as soon as he does that, then they have this conversation where she discovers not only is he a prophet, but she says, well, I know a Messiah is coming. It's almost like she's leading him. Like, know me. Well, I know, is this you? And then that beautiful statement in verse 26, when he says, I that speak unto thee am he. So here I feel like it comes full circle, that she knew of him and what he could do. And here he's saying, yeah, this is what I can do. And immediately she left that the water pot that she brought by herself because of everything she'd done in the past. And she goes back and runs back and tells everyone, it's him. It's the Messiah, because he told me everything I did. So she's bringing up all the dirt on herself, right? Not saying he's wonderful in this, but she's saying he told me everything. He knows everything I did. He knows what you guys know, and he loves me still, and he is the Messiah. He's here. So I love this story because to me, it's about strength. It's about hope. And I see the similar vein in these other women that we've talked about so far. Despite the odds, despite what things look like, they kept walking, even in despair, even in grief, even in fear. Hannah, she was also afraid. If something happened to Elkanah, she didn't have any support. So there was also a level of fear there. But these women were so faithful, and it helps me in my life. And it's a great reminder that the Lord knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows what we're going to do. He knows what we can do. And he knows what we want. And sometimes when we want and it's righteous, like having kids, and we don't get what we want, that can be confusing. But he has all the answers. And I love that the scriptures do contain stories of women that help us to realize. And then when we read these things, the Spirit can confirm to us right now that these things are true, that these principles are true. So that's why I chose this one, just because I love it. It's about relationship. It's about hope. It's about discovery. And it's just about Jesus knowing us and being there.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I feel like every time I've been in a discussion about the woman at the well, like I learned something new, and I felt like I learned something new. Like I hadn't ever thought of her just being so alone and having to go at a time when no other women were at the well because she would be shunned or she didn't feel comfortable. And so I love that added insight of how even if we are alone, we're not really alone. So thank you so much. And now we'll hear from Julie.
Okay, so I don't know why, but I have chosen the woman who was taken in adultery, which is only a couple of verses in John chapter 8. But for some reason, this is one of the New Testament stories that always speaks to me. And here's what I love about it. It is such an honest exchange between this woman and Christ.
Mm-hmm.
He comes along and she is about to be stoned for adultery. And well, first of all, he just looks at the accusers and he's like, don't be judgy, don't be hypocrites. And they all leave. And then the woman is there with Christ, and she does not blame anyone. She's not like, oh, my husband was a jerk, so, I had no choice but to commit adultery. Or, I had a tough childhood, so of course this, I made this choice. She does not blame or victimize herself.
Mm-hmm.
She knows what she did and she's honest about it. And then the Lord also is honest. He doesn't say, oh, you poor thing, you did have a hard childhood, no wonder this happened to you, or give her any kind of justification. He does not condone at all. He just said, you made a wrong choice, don't do it again. But he does it so lovingly and so forgivingly. So to me, this is always just such a good lesson of, obviously bad things happen to us sometimes that are out of our control. But a lot of times there are things, choices, and attitudes that are within our control. But for some reason, we are unwilling to take responsibility for them and try to place the blame outwardly. So I don't know. I just love this honest exchange of taking responsibility for your actions, understanding you did something wrong, but you can still go forward with forgiveness and start over and, be a good person and make better choices. I just really love this little exchange.
I love that. Thank you. I love that story too, because I feel like, kind of like you said, is that the Lord is there to forgive us and uplift us, and also help us move on from the past. Like when he
does save her, love her, and forgive her, but I just love it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, well, thank you, everybody. I didn't really have any other agenda other than talk about women in the scriptures. I feel like it's something that I love to read about and learn about, and it's fun sometimes just to kind of hear other people's perspectives and what sticks out to them and what inspires them. So to those watching today, we're celebrating the launch of my biblical novel on Hannah, and we also have the point of view character of Samuel in there. So it was definitely a history lesson for me to learn about everything going on in the country at the time. And I hope for those of you that have time to read that will enjoy it. So thanks, everybody. And thanks, friends, for sharing all your insights today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.